Well, hey everyone, and welcome back to Get Your Geek On's Marvel Cinematic Universe Retrospective. I'm Robert, that I think is Aaron, and we're here to talk movie by movie through the MCU's Infinity Saga, 23 movies across 11 years.
Expect spoilers as we get into each movie, but we will let you know whether we think every movie is an essential movie for the overall arc of the MCU. Think of it as your guide for getting into the MCU.
Are you Spider-Man right now? Or okay, cool. So yeah, there's definitely a couple of filler movies, although if you're a completionist like me, you might rate them all essential.
Especially my movies.
We'll find out about that, Spider-Man. So 2017 Spider-Man Homecoming is the wall crawler's solo entry into the MCU, coming off his appearance in Captain America Civil War. The movie is directed by John Watts and stars Tom Holland, Robert Downey Jr., Michael Keaton, Jon Favreau, Jacob Batalon, Laura Harrier, and Zendaya. And it made $117 million on opening weekend, $880 million over its run. So
almost $1 billion.
Very successful. Almost $1 billion. The sequel gets there. So, all right. Well, let's start talking about, is this movie essential to the MCU Infinity Saga arc?
I mean, it's Spider-Man. It's essential. It's essential because I'm in it. Oh, gosh. I can't breathe the same way. Oh, I can't breathe in it. I can't.
Oh, my God. You're not Peter Parker.
No. But, I love how I still wear a Spider-Man shirt.
Yeah.
But yeah, essential, not for the, Infinity Stones, but I think story-wise, it kind of is essential because it does show the relationship between Iron Man and Spider-Man a lot more, I think.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, when you look at the Infinity Saga as a whole, this movie is not essential to that movie or to that arc.
Yeah.
As you talked about, the relationship between Tony and Peter is really essential, especially once you get to Endgame, and quick spoilers for that one. That's part of what gets Tony off the sideline. Is because he wants to save the kid.
I lost the kid. I need to save the kid.
Right. He wants to bring him back. So that's what gets him back into the game, which ultimately is the reason why we defeat Thanos.
Yeah.
So the relationship between Tony and Peter is hugely important, and it's very much developed in this movie. However, if you only went into the, Infinity War and Endgame having seen, Civil War, which we did say that's definitely essential.
Yeah.
That does set up that relationship, and you would understand. Is it as deep? Is it as meaningful? Maybe not. But, you get the Civil War, and then obviously in Infinity War, you get a lot of these two characters together, fighting alongside one another. And so I think that you could conceivably skip this one. Not saying you should, but you could and still get the overall MCU Infinity Saga arc. So if you're one of those people that, you've seen all these movies, but now you just want to rewatch it and watch the condensed version, you could skip this one.
I honestly would personally skip it, honestly, even as a Spider-Man fanatic. Because, if you saw Captain America Civil War, you're good.
So, all right. Well, coming into this movie, we're coming off the heels of Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2. I remember the public expectations for this movie. So it had only been a few years since we'd had the Andrew Garfield Amazing Spider-Man movies. It's the third live-action Spider-Man movie. Everybody's talking about it's a reboot. It's already, the third set of movies within a decade, because I believe this came out in 2017. Yeah. Tobey Maguire's third Spider-Man movie came out in 2007. Literally, within a 10-year span, we had 3 different live-action Spider-Mans, which is crazy. But people were really excited, especially because of that cameo in Civil War. And then you had Iron Man coming in. People loved the Iron Man. So that's what I remember. People were really excited for this version of the character. What do you remember about, it was only a few years ago. What do you remember about it?
I remember the same thing. The public expectation was really high. I remember everybody was ecstatic that Sony was finally letting Spider-Man come home. Mm-hmm. You had all the memes out there of Captain America carrying him, you're coming home, soldier. Sure. So everybody, I think the hype was there. Yeah,
even the name of the movie, people were kind of saying is it's Spider-Man coming home. It's home. He's it's Homecoming.
It is.
So yeah, I definitely feel that fit in. I do remember there was a little bit of concern about would Sony interfere?
Yes.
Would they let Marvel make the movie that we all wanted to see, or would they interfere with it? I think for the most part, people were excited, but there was a little bit of concern about that.
There was, because I remember, I love how you commented Spider-Man 2007 Tobey Maguire. It was heavily influenced by Sony, them wanting Venom to come out,
right.
And unfortunately, Sam Raimi kind of had to give in. Studio gives them the check, and
sure.
They make the call. And then with Andrew Garfield, I believe they really wanted the Gwen death storyline. I believe they pushed hard on that.
Well, they were pushing hard on that, and also pushing hard on like Sinister Six stuff.
Heavily.
And so they really they set up so many threads in that Amazing Spider-Man 2 movie that they never pay off. And so definitely, the studio interference in the Spider-Man movies
are heavy.
Has been very strong. Up to this point. So yeah, there was definitely some concern.
Yeah, and I agree.
But personally, I remember I loved the cameo of Spider-Man in Civil War. Immediately, Tom Holland was my favorite portrayal of Peter Parker Spider-Man. Even after that movie, I liked it better than the Tobey Maguire version. I liked it better than the Andrew Garfield version. So I was super excited about getting a solo movie of Spider-Man. And I love Michael Keaton, so I was really excited to have him join the MCU as well. I was a little bit not super jazzed about Iron Man coming into this movie. He's not my favorite, although I love Robert Downey Jr.'s portrayal. It was kind of can't we just have Spider-Man have his own? Why do we have to bring in Iron Man? But I kind of understood it from the story perspective of why they did it, and so that's what I remember personally going into this movie with.
And I'm kind of the same way. Personally, Tom Holland is one of my favorite Spider-Man. I am torn with him and Andrew Garfield because I really did like Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man, but I wasn't happy with his Peter Parker.
I would agree.
And this one, so far, in watching this one, Tom Holland does a good job of both, I think.
Yeah.
So I'm still iffy because I actually kind of want to say Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man itself almost edges out over Tom Holland's, but Tom Holland as the character beats Andrew Garfield.
Oh, interesting. All right, well, let's get into the plot of Spider-Man Homecoming. So, post-Civil War, Peter wants to be an Avenger, right? He just helped Tony in Civil War, now he wants to be an Avenger. And months go by, and Tony and Happy just kind of ignoring him, not returning his calls, and he wants to do more. But one night, he's patrolling the neighborhood, and he comes across a group of thieves using some very high-tech weapons. It causes an explosion, and eventually, he stumbles onto a crew that's led by the Vulture. And he tries to tell Tony about it, and Tony basically tells him, let it go. Other people are going to handle it. Don't deal with stuff this big. It's too big for you. But Peter he comes across a piece of the weapon. He decides he's going to continue his investigation. He still wants to figure out, he wants to track down this crew. And it ends up leading him to Washington, D.C., right? Because he's tracking the crew there. That's where they're going, right? So while he's there, his friend Ned helps him disable the tracker on his suit. They unlock some other features of it in the meantime. And he goes and tracks the crew. He stops him in the middle of a heist. He gets in the Vulture's way again, keeps annoying the Vulture. But he actually, in the process of that, gets stuck inside of a truck, and he's captured there for the next night. He misses a big school thing, very Spider-Man-y, right? Mm-hmm. He misses something because he's being Spider-Man. And meanwhile, some of Peter's friends, including Ned and his love interest, Liz, in this movie, they're classmates. They end up getting trapped in the Washington Monument with the piece of weapon that kind of explodes, and it looks like everybody's going to die. Peter's got to save them. He does, and, seems like everything is going pretty well. He's still trying to figure out who's behind this crew. He ends up tracking them. Again, he figures out they're going to have an arms deal on a ferry. So he goes to stop the arms deal on the ferry. Everything goes wrong. Big explosion. The bad guys escape. The ferry is falling apart. It looks like people are going to die. Iron Man has to show up and save everyone. And he basically tells Peter, again, you should have listened to me. I told you to stop. You didn't. I'm taking the suit back. You're no longer Spider-Man. And so Peter is, down in the dumps, but he decides he's just going to try and, be a kid. He's going to just go to school. He's just going to keep his head down and figure out what's going on. He decides he's going to go to homecoming with Liz. He invites her to go. She says yes. Everything's happy. He shows up at her door. Who answers the door? Her dad, who is
Michael Keaton,
the Vulture. So he finds out the guy he's been chasing this whole time is his new, girlfriend's dad, if you want. I don't know if they're boyfriend, girlfriend yet, the details.
The date, at least.
Whatever. And so he kind of figures it out as they're on their way to the dance. Michael Keaton, the Vulture, figures out that he's Spider-Man and, basically says, you saved my daughter's life in Washington. I'll let that go one time, but if you get in my way again, I'm going to kill you. Peter decides he can't just let him go. He's got to stop him. And in the process, he goes to try and stop him. Ned has to help him out. He's this guy in the chair. And he eventually does stop the Vulture, and he actually saves his life. Big Spider-Man thing. Again, they hit some major Spider-Man beats with this movie.
Oh, yeah.
And they do a really good job with it. But he saves Vulture's life and stops him. And Tony decides that you're worthy of being an Avenger. Join the team, and Peter turns him down. He says, no, I'm going to stay close to the ground, be a friendly neighborhood Spider-Man. And as the movie ends, Peter's Aunt May, played by Marissa Tomei, discovers that he's Spider-Man. All right, so that's the movie in a nutshell. Yeah. So tell me a little bit about watching this movie. What do you remember, or what are the standout scenes and performances from this movie for you?
I do like Tom Holland. I think he is the first actor to finally nail a Peter Parker and a Spider-Man.
Yep.
Toby did good as Peter, not good as Spider-Man. Andrew Garfield the opposite. And now we have an actor who nailed both of them.
Yep.
And I really actually enjoyed the scenes where he did unlock the suit, took off the training wheel mode, and now we have him talking to essentially Karen.
Yeah.
The suit's AI. I thought all those interactions with Karen and him still kind of learning a little bit about the suit, even a little bit about who he is and what he wants to do.
Sure.
I liked it a lot. And the other standout things I like is something we didn't really get, not at all, to me, in the Tobey Maguire film. And very little did we get it in the Andrew Garfield films, but how highly intelligent Peter is. Because in the comics, he's the top 10 smartest people in the universe.
Sure.
And we see him building web fluid. We see him building the web shooter. His original web shooters come out before the one he got from Tony. So you see that engineer side is there. That chemist is there. And the fact that he's almost fluent in Spanish, it even seems like, as he's talking here and there, and he's answering stuff like that.
Yep.
And he just looks at a math equation. Oh yeah, this, and this. Cool. He knows his stuff.
Yeah, for sure.
So I think all those scenes, finally, we get a Peter Parker that is truly Peter Parker and someone who could do the wittiness of Spider-Man.
Yeah, he feels like a nerd.
Yeah.
Like he's, super smart at a school of super smart people, and he's, the key to them winning the Nationals. At least everyone thinks he is, for their academic team, So he's, a genius among geniuses. And that definitely stands out. And I do think that, his portrayal of, he's kind of socially awkward until he puts the suit on. And once he's got the suit on, he feels confident, he feels comfortable. The quips, the humor, it's all there. I definitely agree with you. I think his portrayal of both Peter Parker and Spider-Man, I think is really good. And he is playing two different characters, and I like the way that he plays both of them. I like the interactions that he has with his friends as Peter, and certainly with, the criminals. I think the opening scene where he is confronting the ATM robbers, and they're all in Avengers masks, and he's like, oh hey, even quick things like, hey Thor, Hulk, it's good to meet you, because obviously they weren't there in Civil War. And he's just kind of making these quips and everything, and it feels very Spider-Man. You mentioned the talking with Karen, and I remember the first time I saw this, it kind of hit me weird. I was like, why does he have a talking suit? That's an Iron Man thing.
Yeah.
But I think it's actually a really clever way to have that inner monologue that Spider-Man has in the comics and still have that be present on screen without it being voiceover, which is a lot of what they did in the first couple of movies. is they use voiceover like in the intros or the outros, or even like in Into the Spider-Verse, they kind of use it, and they have in an animation world, they can kind of make it like it's words on the page.
Exactly.
But to do it in live action, this was a really clever way to get that kind of inner monologue, that running commentary that Spider-Man is known for into the movie. So I thought it, on further reflection, I think it works really, really well.
I agree, because that is a lot of what it is that is a lot of how it works with Spider-Man. He has that inner monologue of like, okay, what am I going to do? And he doesn't kill. Like, he tries really hard to avoid killing anyone.
Yeah.
And you kind of see it with the Karen, and I like it because you see it with the Karen outfit. Do you want to gauge in what was it? Not kill mode, but it was
instant kill.
Instant kill. And he's like, wait, no, I don't want that. He doesn't want to kill.
It's like enhanced battle mode or something like that. And he's like, yeah, sure. And then it's like instant kill activated.
Wait,
he's like,
no.
no.
And I love that, because that shows how much he doesn't want to kill anybody. He just wants to help people and stop these bad guys from ruining his city, or just Queens, essentially, because that's his main area.
For sure.
So I like the fact that, like you said, it's a good way to introduce that monologue of, why am I not killing? Well, because I really don't want to. And you kind of see that almost the struggle, because you can say Karen is the darker side real quick of him, of wanting to be like, hey, well, just kill him, like, real quick. Because she brings it up like every few moments. It's like, kill him now? No, kill him? Sure. Okay, no. And I really do like that. And I think that they nailed that part of the monologue. They nailed those quips. Like you said, the bank scene is probably the best one, I think, out of it. And I do like that in the comic books, they talk about the Parker luck, which is always the bad luck he gets.
Yeah.
And how where he's doing the recon on the van, and he like jumps thinking the webbing's going to come out, but it's the taser web. He falls to the ground, then he gets stuck. And you see him in the background, like, struggling, and these guys are still like, what's going on? Like, oh, wait. And that's supposed to be the Parker luck. It's supposed to be that good, like, there's good luck, because they never saw him, but the bad luck of he's screwing up over here. Yeah. Really, really bad.
Well, and I think maybe one of my favorite moments in the entire MCU is just, for a quick moment that was very, very funny, is when he first sees the kind of explosion light, and he's trying to investigate it. He leaves the party, which again is Peter Parker wants to do something. Spider-Man, I have to go do this, right? Yeah. It's like, I want to fit in with my friends, but as Spider-Man, I have a responsibility, right? That's very much who Spider-Man is, right? Yeah. And so he goes to chase it off, and it's like he's starting to chase, and he goes, and there's no building. He's got to run across a golf course or whatever it is. Like, it was just kind of a very clever moment. Like, he's out in the suburbs. Like,
he can't be.
He can't be swinging around things. And of course, they make kind of the meta commentary of Ferris Bueller in that moment. Like that's a good comedy. I do think the comedy of this movie really, really works. But I also think it's balanced well by the character arcs. I mean, I think that Peter's arc in this movie of going from the guy who wants to do more, he wants to be involved more, he wants to be an Avenger, to the character that understands that he needs to take a step back and he needs to learn more, he needs to grow more, and turning down Tony at the end. I think it's really important. Yeah. And getting into the meat of the story, the performances, I think that Michael Keaton really, he blows it out of the water in this movie.
Does he?
And that scene in the car,
that gave me goosebumps.
Is maybe just one of the best scenes in the MCU, where you have Peter in the back seat, and he's sitting there with Michael Keaton's daughter, on their way to homecoming. He knows that this guy's a criminal, that he's the Vulture, and you see the wheels start to turn, and Vulture starts to figure out this guy's Spider-Man, and like just the way he says, Spider-Man, your pal Spider-Man.
Yeah, he starts hinting that he already knows.
It's so good, and it's just like, that's why you get an actor like Michael Keaton, because he just absolutely sells it. He's so good in this movie. As the guy he's a small-time criminal. He's not looking to take over the world. He just wants to provide for his family.
Exactly.
And you mentioned he's kind of created by Iron Man, because in the aftermath of the Battle of New York, when the Avengers defended the world against Loki and the aliens, he was part of the cleanup crew, and then Tony Stark basically created a new government department, the Department of Damage Control. They're going to handle all the cleanup crews, and it doesn't matter who else is contracted to do it or who's he talks about, I bought trucks, I
sunk all my money into this.
Right, and doesn't matter, you're out of luck. So he ends up going into a life of crime. But really, he just wants to provide for his family. And throughout this movie, I think they do a really good job of, he still wants to stay under the radar. He's not looking to, get too big time. And it's just at every turn, Spider-Man keeps interfering. Spider-Man just keeps, his deals go off the rails. He can't sell the stuff he has. He keeps trying to steal more stuff, and Spider-Man gets in the way. And so by the end of it, you understand why he's so frustrated with Spider-Man.
Oh, yeah. And that's true. And that's how he becomes a Spider-Man villain. Because Spider-Man's the only thorn in his side because he stayed so low-key that the Avengers don't care. And I guess you can also think about, at this point, he's also possibly too big for the FBI because he has the high-tech weaponry to probably take them out. And S.H.I.E.L.D.'s not really here right now.
Yeah.
So it's like they're still rebuilding, so you can't send S.H.I.E.L.D. in after him. So I do like that they sell you on the almost, and I hate saying it because I don't really like it, but they almost make you feel a little bad for him.
Sure.
And I actually
he's a sympathetic villain.
And they did it right though.
Yeah.
Because like I've seen where you try to feel bad for these other villains, and it's like he's so evil though. Like how can I feel bad? And this one's like they don't start off evil. He's not evil. He just, like you said, I bought these trucks. I want to provide. And I think Tinkerer says it later, or maybe it's the first Shocker. They make the mess, and now they're getting paid to clean up their own mess.
Right.
And I'm like, oh, that's so true. Like when you sit there and think about it, and that's when it resonated with me. Like, man, I probably would do the same thing if I was the Vulture because the Avengers just made this mess. I got paid to clean it up. Oh no, we're gonna pay ourselves now to clean it up. Yep. So okay.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Well, so we already talked about one favorite scene. I have another favorite scene that I want to talk about. Before we get to that, do you have any standout scenes, anything that you want to specifically talk about?
There's two that stand out real quick. And I agree with you on the car one. I think that's where I think Michael Keaton almost shined. And don't get me wrong, any scene 100%. He's in, he steals.
Yeah.
But that scene, I love
it's his best scene in the movie.
I love the face he gives. I got to give him the dad talk. And it's just like, dude, like I felt like that felt like a dad moment, like just in general, not like as a villain.
He does a great job of not letting his daughter know I'm about to threaten this guy like for real, exactly. Not just as a dad. Yeah. And
I just love when she's got out of the car. He has this like smile on his face, but it's not like the I'm happy smile. It's like the I'm gonna probably kill your boyfriend smile, and not because I'm the dad. It's because I need to save my business.
Yeah.
That scene stood out for me, and then it's a funny thing that stands out for me. I don't really care for the character Ned. I won't lie. I don't. I know he's big in the comics, but I've always been a Harry Osborn fan more than I have been a Ned fan. But the scene that sums up how he gets his powers. They don't give us a whole backstory like they did with Andrew Garfield as a reboot.
Right.
It was, so you got bit by a spider. Yeah. Man, I wonder, the spider, and he just says the spider's dead. And that's our origin story right there in 2 sentences. And I love it because, we spent the first half of the first Amazing Spider-Man movie with Andrew Garfield. We spent that first half talking about his origin. We're done. I love that.
Yeah. It's a great job. I think the scene that I really wanted to talk about is a scene that I know it has echoes from the comic, so it might even be something that you're familiar with from the comic, is when he gets trapped under the rubble and he sees like his reflection and he sees the Spider-Man mask and he's trying to come on, Peter, come on, Spider-Man, you can do this. And it's a really powerful moment because right before that, he's a kid and he's like, somebody help me, I'm trapped, I can't move. And you can feel his panic and how scared he is that, he's about to die. And then he kind of has to look inside himself. He hears, Tony Stark's voice in his head, like if you're nothing without the suit, then you don't deserve it. And he does. I love the way that progresses, where it's come on, Peter, come on, Spider-Man. Like you can do this, and the way he lifts himself and he pushes it off, and like it's so cool. Is it is it like cheesy a little bit? Sure, I don't care. It's so good.
It was the powerful scene. It's a scene that we needed for Spider-Man to finally realize Spider-Man is a needed hero in this universe.
Yeah.
And you're right. There is a scene in the comics where he is trapped under a bunch of rubble and he has to kind of coax himself out of it. And I agree. That is a very powerful scene because at this point we just had him talk to Michael Keaton's character. about how he's like, look, we're just the small men.
Yeah.
We're the fleas that are, or what does he play? We get the scraps that these guys get at the table that they're willing to give us. So you had that monologue of the villain already, which to me was a great monologue. It was one of the better ones. And I'm the same way. I don't really care for these monologues from villains. Why are you sitting here telling me your whole plan? But I like how he was just like, yeah, I was just buying myself time. And it was like, oh, it wasn't just here's my evil plot. It was, yeah, I really needed to buy like 2 minutes while this thing was loading up.
Yeah.
And I loved it because Peter's also new essentially at all of this. And he didn't, I thought about something else too, but he's new at this. And so he doesn't know, maybe I should just throw this punch now or do anything now. Like Iron Man probably would have showed up and just shot a rocket at him and knocked him out.
Exactly.
But Peter's like, well, I'm going to listen because, well, wait a minute, what? Oh, crap, I'm getting attacked.
Yeah. So,
but the other thing too, and I just thought about it, was we actually get a fifth villain. I forgot all about the guy that's with the drug. Oh, what's his name? The Prowler.
Aaron Davis.
Yeah, Aaron Davis. Myself. Yeah. I forgot the Prowler's in it. So technically, yeah, a fifth villain almost.
Yeah, and obviously we get a quick little shout out, to a character that is the uncle of Miles Morales, a future Spider-Man. So they're seeding a lot of different things. There is even a deleted scene where he's on the phone apologizing to Miles that he's not going to make it somewhere, and he drops the name Miles. So that doesn't end up in the movie. It's in a deleted scene. But that's partially they're setting that up, that maybe we could have another version of Spider-Man show up, Miles Morales. Now in the comics, he doesn't show up until after Peter Parker has died. Do not kill Tom Holland. I will come for you. I think that the humor in the high school works really well. Yeah. The humor as he's Spider-Man works really well. I think it's just overall it's a really good movie. The action's really solid as well. It's a really solid movie. Yeah. And I don't think, even at the time it came out, it was one of those movies I went, is this my favorite Spider-Man movie ever? It's not quite there for me. There's a couple other ones that I like more, but it's really, really good.
It is. It's a very solid, well-built, well-structured movie. There's a couple little plot holes here and there, but I think I ranted and raved on other videos about the plot holes. In this one, they're small enough that I can live without them. I can live with it. I can
just because you're a Spider-Man fan.
Probably, but it's Spider-Man. I don't know. Like there wasn't. I think because the storytelling in this one was one of the better storytellings. You got a lot about the Vulture, even a little Scorpion, Tinkerer. They were starting to show up everybody's personality in this film, leading it to a possible second film. Now, the only drawback I have is we don't really touch on any of their stuff yet. We get the second film, and it's a whole nother film because it's after Endgame, and we have new threats, new things going on. But to me, it's just one of those, we threw 5 villains. 4 Prowler is always, he goes back and forth. So you got 4 villains, at least, that we threw up there that we got you ready for, and then they're not even talked about later.
Yeah, and we've got more to come. So we don't know how much is going to come out. It looks like Vulture is going to appear in the Morbius movie. Whether he'll have an actual role or maybe just be a quick cameo, we don't really know yet. But that's kind of what it looks like. So I'm definitely looking forward to that. And I'm hopeful that, we've got another Spider-Man movie coming out, I believe next year, 2021, in July. So we'll see which characters they bring back, how they build on this. I am hopeful that they return to something like the Scorpion. I think that could be a really cool beat to pick up. Obviously, the Tinkerer is still out there. He didn't get arrested. Other characters that were introduced in the next Spider-Man movie are still out there. And so, it'll be really interesting to see what comes next for this version of Spider-Man. But yeah, for this movie, again, we kind of talked about there's not really anything that ties it to the Infinity Saga. And so, there's nothing there. But let's get into our final thoughts overall. And how are you going to score this movie?
So my overall final thoughts: 1, I didn't like we didn't have Uncle Ben, so that was a negative for me.
Okay.
2, we get a hint that there was a male role model in the house because he does have suits and stuff. May had clothing.
Yeah, him. and they drop it in Civil War, and they even talk about it in this movie. That, he kind of talks about everything that my aunt has gone through.
Exactly.
If you know the story of Spider-Man, they're talking about Uncle Ben. Exactly. But certainly they don't specifically say Uncle Ben died.
Exactly.
They don't.
Or why or any of it. So those kind of bothered me a little bit. So storyline, all in all, though, I honestly wasn't as impressed this watch as I thought I would have been. And the only reason I think about it is because to me, and maybe it's just how I look at life, it is about almost like a boy and his father, because of the way Iron Man and Spider-Man look at it. Almost the way he looks at Iron Man as a father figure.
Yeah.
You know, and it feels like this is me trying to live up to my dad and trying to be like my dad. And I think the best line in the movie with Iron Man and him is, "I wanted you to be better than me." And I don't think we said that at all in this video. And I like that line because he tells him in the very beginning, "Don't do anything I would do, and definitely don't do anything I wouldn't do." There's that little spot in the middle.
That's where you
live. And then again, it comes back around. I wanted you to be better. Right. And so it really does feel like a father-son thing. And I like it and I don't, because I never thought of Spider-Man seeing Tony as a father figure. Maybe because they almost de-aged Spider-Man in this for the movie purposes versus the comics. You know, in the comics, he looks up to him as a role model, but not as that father figure. So that's an interesting part of it.
Yeah, definitely. In the MCU, you have Tony, you know, in his 40s, roughly, and Peter's, you know, 15. Mm-hmm. So the timeline makes sense that he would look up to him that way. Exactly. Obviously, he's probably an intellectual hero of his. You know, they're both geniuses. You know, now they both have powers, or at least, you know, Iron Man has a suit, which is basically a power. And you know, then he was recruited by the Avengers, so it makes sense in the movies. Exactly. But definitely, it's a very different relationship than what they've established in the comics.
Exactly. And it was just the way I looked at it. I'm like, you know what? It just feels like a boy and his son, or a father and his son. So I was like, okay. But overall, I mean, it was still a good movie. I'd still really recommend it. Go watch it. Solid acting by everybody: Michael Keaton, Tom Holland, Robert Downey Jr., Chris Evans, little scenes here and there. Yeah. I forgot her name. You just said it for Aunt May.
Marissa Tomei.
Marissa Tomei does a good job as a younger Aunt May. Yeah. They come in all shapes and sizes and ages.
I love the relationship between her and Peter. Yeah. You know, Aunt May and Peter, and it's definitely, this is a different version than we've ever had, because pretty much throughout all of comics and throughout the previous movie versions, you know, it's kind of the silver-haired Aunt May, you know, like the old doddering Aunt May. And it's almost more like she's a great aunt than just an aunt, you know, like, because of they're painting her as this, you know, very elderly woman. And so to have a different dynamic where you have, you know, a woman who's a contemporary of Tony Stark, she's in her 40s, you know, maybe early 50s, but around that age, and then a teenager, it does feel more like, you know, she definitely isn't a mother, but she has a lot of those motherly instincts. And I think that the way that they relate to one another really works really well. And the two actors are really talented, Tom Holland and Marissa Tomei. Overall, I really enjoy this movie. I think it's a really solid Spider-Man movie. Mm-hmm. I do think it has a lot of elements that bring it into the MCU that, you know, were necessary to make it an MCU movie, but at the same time, they do detract a little bit from it being a Spider-Man movie. Yeah. You know, there's a lot of Happy and Tony and Avengers and, you know, those types of things. And as much as I enjoy all those things, because I love the MCU, heck, we're doing a series where we're talking about all of the movies of the MCU, I do feel like it does take away a little bit from, it's a Spider-Man movie. And so I do think all of the Spider-Man moments that they hit really well. You understand the balance of Peter versus Spider-Man and all the things he's missing out on because he's Spider-Man, but he also feels like he has to do those things because he's Spider-Man. And I think that works really well. Him understanding more about his powers, more about how to use his suit, I think all those things really work. The relationships that he has really work. I think it's a solid movie. I think there are a couple of spectacular things, Michael Keaton being one. Some of the humor things are right up there and really great. I think the rest of the movie falls into really solid territory. Yeah. You know, and so my overall score, I think I'm going to go first this time. Usually you go first. Yeah. I'm going first this time. I'm going to give it a 7.4 out of 10. I think it's a really solid movie. Okay. I really enjoy it. There's things about it that are excellent. But for the most part, it fits into that really solid section. It's a really good MCU movie.
Okay, and I think I'm gonna come a little bit higher on this one. Actually, I want to give it. Honestly, I want to give it an 8.5. But to be honest, with a few of the drawbacks after watching it this time, and I've watched this one maybe like half a dozen times or so, I'm actually just gonna give it a solid 8. It was a good Spider-Man movie. I think it touched on a lot of different things, but unfortunately, I think there are some parts where it does fall short. I think that Peter not having the suit, I mean, he has his like a sweatsuit essentially, it's just a sweat jacket kind of thing or whatever. Yeah. That's cool and all, and that throws some throwback to like Peter making his own stuff. He's not really knows how to make clothing, I'm sure, because in the comic books, it's like every superhero knows how to make their own suit. It's like, oh yeah, I can look, I'm a tailor too. I didn't mention that's in my powers. And it's like, okay, so I get where they didn't go that he made his own suit. So it always takes me a step back that he gets that Iron Man suit kind of thing right off the bat.
Right.
And just some of the scenes like, okay, well, in the comics, they always struggle. This one, they're not really struggling. It doesn't, you lose some
financially.
Aspects.
Yeah, you're talking about, yeah, sure.
So there's some aspects that they lose that I wish they would have touched on. And there were a couple of moments with the CGI that did throw me off a little bit. That, again, it kind of pulls you back out of it. It's like, oh yeah, I'm watching a movie. And anytime I catch those, it kind of always throws me off. But overall, again, the acting was solid by everybody. Yeah. Anyway, everyone's seen that, okay, this is supposed to be the guy of the scene. Bam, they saw it. And of course, my biggest gripe, which we haven't talked about this whole thing, is Michelle, quote unquote MJ later. And I have so much grudge on that. Like, that bothers me. I miss my redhead.
It's not your MJ.
Nope, not my MJ. Still not my MJ.
Hashtag.
And honestly, in this film, though, too, in this film, she doesn't sell it to me at all. And maybe in the next film, when we review that one, maybe she will sell it to me. But for right now, it's just some random woman who has the initials MJ for no reason.
Yeah, it's an extremely different version of MJ.
Yeah.
And
I mean, nothing wrong with it. It's just not my MJ.
You either buy it or you don't, and you either like it or you don't. If you like Peter with that classic version of MJ, this is not going to be your version. However, in this movie, his love interest is Liz, exactly. And Liz is more of an MJ type than the MJ we get in this movie. And I think their dynamic works really well as well. Obviously, she's not back for the sequel, and I don't think they'll bring her back. Although that would be interesting to have her come back with some sort of a grudge against Peter.
Ooh, that'd be cool.
That would be interesting. So we'll see what happens. So anyways, those are our thoughts on Spider-Man Homecoming. We want to know what you think. So like, comment, subscribe. Let us know down in the comments of this video what you think about this movie. Are we crazy? Are we right? Is Tobey Maguire the best Spider-Man ever? Maybe it's Andrew Garfield. Or is it Tom Holland? I think it's Tom Holland.
Italian Spider-Man.
No. Oh. Anyways, so join us next time, guys. We're going to continue talking about these movies. I think the next movie that comes out is Thor Ragnarok, I believe. That comes out
before Ant-Man too?
It does. So, again, join us next time, guys. This has been Get Your Geek On. I'm Robert. That's Aaron. Thank you so much for joining us, guys, and we will talk to you soon. Remember, what keeps you geeky?